Semester number 2, lesson number 37. Our aim today is what were the positive and negative aspects of the presidents on the brink of the 21st century and kind of going into the 21st century, really. And the three presidents we're going to talk about today are President George H.W. Bush, or George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush. And these are the three presidents that we're going to talk about today. George H.W. Bush on the left, George W. Bush in the middle, and Bill Clinton on the right. The first president we're going to talk about is George H.W. Bush, who was president for one term from 1989 to 1993. He was not voted in for a second term. He supported Iraq during the Iran-Iraq War, at which point he was the vice president. And the important thing you need to know about him, and it adds on during Bill Clinton, is he helps create NAFTA. And NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement. This is something that comes up on the region, so make sure you know it. And really, what NAFTA does, it allows no trade restrictions to exist between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, the three countries that make up North America. So basically, trade between these three countries is freely floating, and there is no, taxes or, trade barriers of any sort. It's free trade between these three countries. Bill Clinton was president from 1993 to 2001, 2 terms. All right. During his presidency, there were some positive economic conditions which existed. All right. He supported NAFTA and added his support to that idea, the North American Free Trade Agreement. He was impeached for lying under oath. However, he was not convicted, similar to what we saw with Andrew Johnson earlier in the year. All right. So he stayed president, even though he did get in trouble for lying under oath to Congress. And he sent troops to Bosnia and bombed Kosovo. And his goal in doing these two things was to protect the human rights of people in foreign countries. And the presidency of George W. Bush, which is during your lifetime, all right, he was president from 2001 to 2009, 2 terms. And he used tax cuts to encourage economic growth. He was the president on 9/11. And he was president during the beginnings of the Iraq and Afghanistan War. The Afghanistan War begins in 2001. The war in Iraq begins in 2003. And the goal of the Iraq War, they went in looking for weapons of mass destruction. They believed, through intelligence that weapons of mass destruction or nuclear weapons existed in Iraq that Saddam Hussein was not telling the rest of the world about. However, they could never locate those weapons. While they were in Iraq, they overthrew the dictator Saddam Hussein, who was a dictator who was hurting his own people, and they started Operation Iraqi Freedom, which started to spread democracy to Iraq. And in Afghanistan, the war on terrorism after 9/11, the United States invaded Afghanistan because they were known to be a country that harbored terrorists. Most notably Al-Qaeda, who was responsible for the 9/11 attacks. And the war in Afghanistan was meant to get rid of the Taliban rule in Afghanistan and bring more of a semblance of a democracy to that area. And in going with this war on terrorism, all right, because this is really, throughout the course of the year, when we've learned about wars, it's been on specific countries. And the war on terrorism is different because the war on terrorism is an idea, an institution, and not a country. And it all starts with September 11th, 2001, in which America was attacked, right? Both at the World Trade Center and in Washington, D.C., as well as in Pennsylvania. This brought about major change in American foreign policy, and a lot of the things we see today in both the foreign and domestic policy go back to what happened on 9/11. And something we see on a daily basis that really was expanded because of 9/11 was the things within the Patriot Act. And the Patriot Act was passed in 9/11 to expand the power of the government to prevent terrorism. This is what allows them to do things such as phone tapping if they feel it's necessary, and wiretapping, all that stuff. And this limits the civil liberties of the people. But the reason the civil liberties of the people are limited is to protect the people as a whole. All right. So the idea of the Patriot Act is, they're not wiretapping on people for small time offenses. They're looking for people who are looking to commit crimes against America, or terrorist crimes of some sort. Our check for understanding today. President Bill Clinton supported the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, primarily as a way to A, normalize trade relations with Cuba, B, stimulate the economic growth in the United States, C, restrict the flow of drugs into the United States, or D, increase the United States trade deficit. And I want you to try to eliminate some answers. This is a little bit of a difficult question, but it's one that if you really think about it, you'll be able to understand. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Have a good night.